Hello. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Reese. I talk about books here. This is my October monthly reading wrap up. I personally feel like I have not recorded a video in a while, so sorry if this is a little rusty. Yeah, I'm gonna talk about what I read in October. It was like an okay month. I did have a book that kind of put me into like a mini slump. It made me not want to pick up other books. We'll talk about that. But yeah, no, it was a good month. Also, shout out to this kind of being the 1 year anniversary of my channel. I thought I would be like posting more regularly by now, but no, I need to do some planning, and that's okay. So look out for more videos on here. Yeah. Okay, let's talk through my Storygraph stats for this month. I finished reading 4 books? No, okay, so wait. I told you, rusty. I finished 4 books, but I was reading 5 and 1 is a DNF. This also felt like a month where things just like dragged on. So some books that I started this month have definitely dragged into November and I'm still reading them. I don't like that. I like when I finish books pretty close to the month mark. I know that's not realistic, but that's just how my brain likes to work. Anyways, I read 1,100 pages, give or take, a little more than that. Moods: reflective, tense, sad, dark, emotional. Yep, that's me. And I read a nonfiction book this month. We'll talk about it. Top genres, as always, literary is kind of where I'm at. But I feel like pretty good mixed bag in terms of that. I'm going to go through these books in the order that I read them, starting with The Anthropologists by Ayşegül Savaş. I'm definitely saying that name wrong, so sorry. This is a book about a young-ish couple building their life together in a foreign city, a city that they are both transplants into. And one of them is an anthropologist, so hence the name. It follows them over the course of a few months, maybe like a year, not super important, while they are searching for an apartment to buy. Lots of observation about home, living, found family, relationships. There is a plot, but I mean, the plot is not, you're not reading this book for the plot. I'll tell you that. Also, I felt like this couple's relationship was one of the most accurate depictions of just like partnership I've read in a long time, or at least a partnership that's kind of similar to mine. I know they can look different. As I said, the plot is not super like important to this book, and that's kind of life, right? Like most of life, hopefully, is pretty even, you know? And then there are like big events, and I feel like a lot of times we are reading books about the big events in people's lives. And this book, yes, buying a house, an apartment is a big event, but this book is really just about observation of everyday life. And of course, it is written by, I think the author is an anthropologist as well. I'm gonna have to write that down to make sure. Anyways, I guess what I'm saying here is I loved the depiction of this relationship. It's written in these lovely short vignettes. The language is very minimal but beautiful. It's not overly descriptive. But yeah, I mean, I love this type of writing style. After the first 3 pages, I was hooked. This was a library book, and after those first few pages, immediately knew I want to purchase this book one day. I would love to have it on my shelf. Other books this reminded me of, the one that came to mind as I was reading was Whereabouts by Jhumpa Lahiri. That book is pretty melancholy, I'll say. It's been, a couple weeks since I finished this book, and I just am now, as I'm talking about it, revisiting it, I'm like very much realizing how much I enjoyed this book. I definitely rated it 5 stars. I think I even added it to my shelf on Storygraph, like your favorites shelf. It's a great one. I am so looking forward to reading more from this author. I believe she just released a book of short stories called Long Distance. I'm hoping to read that soon. Yeah, and then after that book, here's where things got a little tricky. Again, we're going in order, so I'm gonna chat about the book that I DNF'd, which is White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. I'm also probably saying that wrong. This is a modern Gothic story. A little bit magical realism, fantasy? No. Magical realism. A little horror adjacent, according to reviews. It's a generational story about a family that experiences loss and the house in which they inhabit. I DNF'd this. I got over 100 pages in, but the way it was written was ultimately what got too distracting. I think what was happening was the narrator was switching, but there was like an established style in the text of what would happen when the narrator would switch. So that I was clear on, but then there were other times where the narrator would switch and it was not represented in that style. There was a very distinct type of line break, and then you would know, okay, we're switching. But then other times it happened and it didn't have that line break, and it really bothered me. This is probably like the most bookish thing I could be ranting about right now, but I think if you're here, you will understand my frustration. Yeah, the overall effect of that was definitely disorienting, and I think that works in the context of what the story is about, because it is, like, as I said, like, magical realism, horror, like, weird stuff is happening, but yeah, I didn't like it. So sadly, I thought this was gonna be my spooky read for October, and I couldn't do it. I saw that this book was for fans of Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House, which I have actually never read, and I feel like maybe not having that source material in my mind actually kind of hurt me a little when I read this, because, I don't know. Anyways, not counting this author out entirely, I've heard some of her other books are great. Yeah. I think I'm not going to give this book a star rating because I didn't finish it. You understand why. Maybe read some of the reviews, see what other people say. You're probably way less annoyed by line breaky type stylistic things than I am. So yeah. From there, I jumped into Stone Yard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. This book follows a middle-aged woman who moves to a monastery, leaving her past life behind. She was an environmentalist. We meet her briefly before she lives in the monastery, and then the bulk of the story is about her once she's moved there, and her experience. And I believe it's basically set during the start of the pandemic or early days of the pandemic. So that's kind of touched upon, but it's not like core to the story. I enjoyed the writing of this one a lot, especially in the beginning. There were many like little phrases, things I underlined, noted. This is also written in vignettes, like the Anthropologists, which is something I'm finding myself really drawn to. Something that didn't work for me about that, though, in this book in particular, is there were some pretty time jumpy things happening where the vignettes were written, they were about the present and then they would go back to the past. And like, as I'm explaining this, it sounds like it would work, but something about it didn't in this book. I don't quite know why. And because of that, the middle just fell a little flat. The beginning of the book started off super strong. I was like, this is a 4-star book. If not, maybe even higher. We'll see how it goes. But then, yeah, I got into the middle and it kind of dipped. And so ultimately, I'm rating it a 3.5, which I know is not like a huge difference. And 3.5 is still a great book. One thing I want to call out about Stoneyard that I really enjoyed, it's narrated by the main character, and she references a lot of things that are unspoken, unwritten, or untold. Like those lines appear often throughout, those words. And that adds another layer to this, a story being narrated by the main character who is purposefully saying things are untold or unspoken or unwritten, which is really interesting to me. And reflecting back on it, it's something that I'm only really noting the importance of now. And yeah, this is like classic book club question would be to reflect on those things. I actually think this would make a great book club book. Are there questions in this copy about? No. You know how some books have like pre-written questions? My copy does not have those. But anyways, yeah, maybe make this a read for your next book club. Then I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Buckle up. I don't know why I just said that. It was a long book. This was a slow burn, gothic, psychological story, a mystery, if you will. I think it's like kind of a classic. It was written in the 1930s. I'm not going to talk too much about the plot because, as I said, there's a mystery element to it. But broadly speaking, it's about a young woman who meets a slightly older man and goes to live with him at his home in Manderley. Wait, am I saying that right? I just watched like 3 videos about this. There's an English pronunciation, or American English pronunciation, that says Manderley. I don't know. I feel like Manderley. Yeah. Nobody call me out on that. Anyways, okay, yes, this young woman meets a slightly older man. She goes to live with him at his English coastal estate. We're gonna call it Manderley. Foggy, English, rough coastline. The setting plays a really big role in this story. I really enjoyed that. The house, the estate, it's like a character. There was a lot of setup to this. I think it's over 400 pages. It's definitely over 400 pages. A lot of setup to this, but personally, I think it works because you need to have all of that to be invested in what happens in like the second half of this book to these characters. And yeah, that second half, last third, it really kicks into like page turner mode. I was in the mindset of like, I'm gonna stay up to read this book because I just have to know what happens. Yeah, I read some reviews that were like, it shouldn't take this long for me to be invested in this, but I don't know. I think the contrast between the long, slow burn of the beginning and then like the quick pace of the ending adds to the tension of the book. Like this book is like, there's some psychological stuff going on, and I think that dramatic shift is intentional. I guess. This would also be a good book club book. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever say that. My rating, 4 stars. I was kind of going back and forth between 3 or 4, but 4 stars for me. I also read comparisons to this book and Jane Eyre, which I haven't read, but now I definitely want to read. I've picked it up like 2 or 3 times over the past 5 years or so of my reading, and yeah, I was never in the right mood. Maybe I'm in the right mood now. It's like fall, it's kind of rainy outside, all of those things. And the last book that I read in October was The White Darkness by David Grann. This is a nonfiction book. David Grann is the author of Killers of the Flower Moon. He's also the author of The Wager. This is a work of nonfiction, adventure nonfiction, which is a genre that I am kind of into. I think I've always been into it. I read Into Thin Air in high school, and that like cracked something open in my brain. I should say historically, over the past like, I don't know, 5 years, I haven't read a ton of this genre, but I'm starting to read more now. If you watched last month's wrap up, I read Endurance, which is about Ernest Shackleton's, one of his Antarctic adventures, survival story. And this is actually very similar to that because it is about Henry Worsley, a British man, and he was in the army, maybe. Definitely, like, military, we'll say. Don't ask me about ranks. And he trained and completed many Antarctic expeditions because he was very enthralled with the story of Ernest Shackleton. And he was actually related to somebody that had been on one of these journeys with him, which is kind of cool. I picked this one up on an audiobook through the library, actually, so that was cool. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've talked about that before. The ones that I normally listen to just weren't like doing it for me. I also realized I've researched quite a lot about polar exploration. Let me back up. I've researched a good amount of like, how would I say this? I've listened to a lot of podcasts about like your baseline stories of polar exploration. And I've also read Endurance, and that's like kind of the best telling of that story. So basically what I'm saying is when I go to like, oh, I want to listen to a story about, you know, this world, this polar exploration. If I go to a podcast, I kind of know a lot of the information that's being said. Wow, I sound like I'm like some expert. I'm really not. I just have read a handful of books. I'm really into the terror. Anyways, so I was like, you know what? I think it's time for me to listen to some audiobooks. So it's kind of like a podcast, but not. What else do I want to say about this book? It's written really well. I think David Grann is a good nonfiction author. It's like narrative nonfiction. So it's definitely engaging. I'm giving it 3 stars. I'm excited to read The Wager or listen to it on audiobook. I think that's going to be my new thing. Adventure nonfiction books on audiobooks. Wow, I think I've talked a lot about polar exploration, and this channel is about books I read, not about polar exploration. So I think I'm gonna wrap up this video now. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you are a regular watcher, thank you for coming back to this. Sorry that it's my videos have been maybe a little few and far in between. Is that the phrase? Yeah, as I kind of touched upon, I'm really trying to create a schedule for myself so that for this so that I can be more mindful and intentional about creating and not just kind of do it like in a panic mode of, oh no, I need to talk about books, because I want to talk about books. So yeah, thank you. Long-winded way of saying thank you for listening, thank you for watching. It's been a year. I kind of want to do something to like commemorate that, like a video, but I don't know what. So if you're still watching this and you have any ideas, let me know. That would be helpful. I hope you're having a great time with what you're reading. Hopefully no DNFs are dragging you down. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video soon. Bye.